Welcome to the BBC.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the BBC podcast, the Big Black, we mean Between Both Cheeks. That's our other show. So today is really exciting. We have a very special guest with us. Her name is Ashley from the Lullaby, the Fear podcast. We'll have it linked in the show notes. You guys, if you like true crime, you need to go listen to her podcast because it is so well done. So that's what we're talking about today. I don't know, maybe trigger warning. If you don't like true crime, this might not be the episode for you. It's probably going to be all about that. But welcome, Ashley. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and meet all three of you because you guys are very extroverted and you're very comfortable to be around. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah.
Good.
So Ashley, I actually found you and your podcast through my partner. And we were in Vegas and we were driving and he's like, you have to listen to this podcast. And I was like, okay, what is it? And he said true crime. And I was like, nope. Like hard no for me, like absolutely, like not into it. Becca listens to true crime all the time, like as she packs bright orders. Sometimes I'll like listen to what she's listening to. I was like, no, I don't know. Everything about what you do is so magical in the way that you present it. Like, I think for me, it's the page turning. It's very nostalgic from like when I was a kid and my grade 5 teacher used to read to the class and I was in love with that. But girl, it was one episode. The very first one was the game show, show killer. That was the first one I listened to. Yeah. With my partner in the car. And then I was like, we got to our destination. It wasn't quite finished. We did the event. We got back into the car. I was like, put that podcast back on. He was like, okay. And then like I deep dive and I was a crazy person messaging you being like, when are you putting the next one out? Because I listened to every single one, like back to back.
That makes me so happy, especially knowing that you are not a true crime person.
Yeah.
Because that means, because my biggest thing with my podcast is I tell all the details from A to Z. And it's because to learn the behavioral progression is important. And that means talking about horrific events that have happened. And I don't do it to glorify crime, not at all. So to have someone who is not a true crime fanatic tell me that I'm doing a good job in that sense means a lot, because I'm doing it to raise awareness and break that stigmatism of talking about true crime, because these things happen every day. And the more we brush it under the carpet, the more people will just continue to brush under the carpet. So thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it started. And I'm still messaging you like, when's the next one coming out? What's happening? I run out of episodes.
Yeah, it's so good. So if you haven't listened, you need to go listen because it's called Lullaby, and I feel like it's very storybook, nursery rhyme, kind of reminiscent. The intro is fantastic. We need to talk about that. How all your sound effects and things. And as she's like telling you the story, there's storybook flips, like Luba says. There's little chimes. It's whimsical, but then she's like, and her head was cut off and her ears were cut off. And it's not the true crime element, but it's so, you've just done a really brilliant job. And what I really like listening to it is your perspective is always about the victims. And you're like really, like I was listening to one this morning on my drive to work and you're like, that guy's a fucking monster, you know? You're not glorifying it at all. You're raising awareness for the families because some of it is still unsolved or unjustly solved. And yeah, but you guys need to go listen, like the intro and the sound effects. It's a really good production. It's crazy. So we want to know, how do you do it?
So this is super, and I think this is super interesting. So going back to when I was a kid in the 90s, I lived on a farm and we we didn't have cable television. So we watched VHS tapes on repeat and repeat. And if it wasn't that, it was the radio. And I would go to bed at night because I'm scared of the dark. And what I would do, my mom would always turn on, American listeners won't know, but Canadians hopefully will, 630 Ched, which is an AM radio station, and they would play this paranormal show called Coast to Coast. So if I was still awake by 2 a.m, that was on. But before that was the old time radio detective shows. And I loved those, the mystery solving. And it felt as though you had the TV on in the background for just noise, but you could see it in your head. And I wanted to do a podcast that has that intellectual stimulation where you feel like you're getting all these intricate details with the investigation, the psychological analysis, and you can really empathize with the victims involved while learning about the patterns. And I thought, growing up, my grandma used to always read to me before bed. And she would always stop at the end of every chapter and she would say, well, what did we learn, Ashley? She was a kindergarten teacher. So she would say, what did we learn? And I would tell her the morals, and I loved it. And then when I decided to start Lullaby the Fear podcast, I sat down on my stomach. I had my legs crossed like a giddy little teenager. And I'm like, what would capture the audience? But what captured me when I was younger? The attention span of a walnut as a child, right? And that was having to visualize what I was seeing. So if my grandma was able to keep my attention and then bring me back to reality by stopping and discussing what we were talking about, I want to bring that to a podcast, because there are amazing podcasts out there, amazing true crime podcasts out there. But I don't listen to true crime anymore because I don't want to influence what I'm doing. But when I listened, what I wanted personally from a true crime podcast was one that didn't skim over details, one that tried to use documentation, court transcripts to understand the crime to its entirety, and then break it down into sections to analyze it, just like writing an essay. And fun fact, the human attention span lasts like 10 minutes. So I broke that up by using the page flipping. But it wasn't until after I released a couple episodes did I realize that, hey, that actually kind of works with the Lullaby theme. And that's how it just started. And I'm excited that it is where it is now.
Oh my gosh. So you do it all yourself?
Yeah, it's all me.
Wow. That's amazing. It's so well done. Erin, you're going to have to go listen to it. Like,
Yeah,
just the intro. The intro alone, it's like a supercut. It's so good.
I'm interested because I'm a big reader. I love reading. Maybe a little different subject matter, but it really resonates when you say you can see it in your head when you read. And that's why I enjoy reading so much, because if I pick up a book and it doesn't give that to me, I can't finish it. My attention span, I can't get into it. So if something is so detailed and I can actually play it like a movie in my head, I'm all for it. So I'm ready.
I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, you're going to binge, Erin. Watch. Okay, so you talked about you do it all. So what is your experience with podcasting? Like, did you just learn it on your own, self-taught?
Yeah, self-taught. So I had a podcast before Lullaby, and it started how everyone starts a podcast. Hey, do you want to start a podcast? And we're like, yeah, sure. And it was me and 2 other girls, and it was a sex talk health podcast. So that's why when you guys were like, yeah, we're rated R, I'm like, fuck yeah. So we would do, every episode would be a different topic, and we would play games, and it was really immersive for the audience. And I myself, with the other 2 girls, we would design the template. And one day I thought we should do a true crime episode, because I'm a true crime person. And I'm like, let's do where we each do a crime from our hometown. Now, I went hard, you guys. I went so hard. I wrote out like 4 pages of jot notes, and I came in. And then when the other 2 girls, they didn't realize how much I was really into it. And it took them maybe 10 minutes each to say their portion of the story. And I remember going, fuck you guys, I wasn't skimping out. So I went, and it added 40 minutes to the episode, which was fine because it was good. But then after, they made a comment like, you should do a true crime podcast. I'm like, maybe I should do a true crime podcast. And later that podcast disbanded about a year later. And I'm like, I'm going to do that true crime podcast. And that's how it started, because I edited the previous podcast and I learned how to market from the girl who was in it, because she had a business of her own. And the other woman was starting a business herself. So we were kind of three entrepreneurs coming together to just discuss random hobbies. And I learned a lot from them to Lullaby. And I'm really lucky that I can visualize something in my head before it's even created. And that's how I'm lucky to actually produce it. So it's a lot of Googling, a lot of trial and error, but that's why it's fun.
Do you have a background in writing or creative, like research or journalism?
I do.
Or is it just a hobby?
So I went to Victoria School of the Composite Arts here in Edmonton. And initially I wanted to be a WWE diva. I wanted to kick people's asses. So to do that, you have to be an actress. So I went to Vic to be an actress, and I auditioned to get into the advanced stage classes, and I enjoyed it. It was great. And then on the side, I took writing for the stage and screen and directing. And that allowed me to learn how to, I don't want to say create, because with my podcast, I'm not creating narratives. I'm not creating stories. I'm telling the truth. But it allowed me to do it in a way where people can visualize it, can become immersed in it. And that's how it kind of just came. So the fact that reads in my podcast, thank you very much.
Yeah, totally. And like how you structure it too. Like it's interesting to hear that you do structure it in sort of 10-minute chunks, because listening, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like an essay. Like it's got a beginning, a middle, an end. It's very structured. And then like thinking to our podcast, I'm like, we just talk. We don't have any structure. But it's a different theme. It's good for me to hear that you do that intentionally. That was one of my questions, was, is this planned, or is she just like so smart that that's just how it works out?
Yeah. So if you're interested, the way I do template it is I have everything done. I used to do it on pen and paper, and I used to read from pen and paper, but now I've had to like evolve with society. So now I actually do it on a tablet and I go from there. But I have things in bullet points. And then when I go off book, Aaron, this will make sense when you listen to my podcast. When I describe the story. And then when I'll close the book, and you'll hear the book closing. And then that's when I go off my points. And that's basically my off book. I'm going off book, but everything else is completely structured. And by breaking that fourth wall, it allows me, as being a solo podcaster, to engage, make my listeners feel like I'm talking to them, because I am, right? So that's how I do that.
And how long has a podcast been out now?
Just over 2 years. 2 years in, I believe it was August is when I started.
Wow.
Yeah, about 2 years now.
And
time flies.
I mean, it's been so good. Like when I go back and I listen to our first podcast at the beginning, like it's so cringe.
We used to drink while we recorded.
That's quality content right there, though.
Yeah.
That's memories.
Oh my God. Memories, yeah. But your quality has always been like top notch from the beginning. And are you up for some sort of award, or where does that lie right now?
Oh, you're making me blush. Yes. So I am proud to say that Lullaby the Fear podcast is nominated for the Outstanding True Crime Series for the Canadian Podcast Awards. So all of Canada, Canadian podcasts, I'm top 5 for that category. And that's incredible, because as I said earlier, with what you were saying is how you're not a true crime person, is you kind of get imposter syndrome a little bit, where people go, well, you're not a psychologist. You're not a detective. Why should I believe the things you're saying? Why are you reputable? So to have it recognized on that level with my intent of bringing this awareness and trying to drop the stigmatism of true crime, it gives me that empowerment of knowing that what I'm doing it's getting noticed. And I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it because I like to understand motives and crime. And that's why I'm doing it, to help other people recognize these patterns. And then once you start listening to my show, you'll see that I will make references to other episodes, like, here we go, borderline personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. And I like explaining these things. So to be nominated for that it's incredible, especially being in my second year of podcasting.
Yeah, it's huge. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Blushing.
Now, is this something that people vote for, or are there judges? How does it progress to the next stage? Because you're nominated, so how do we get you to win?
So this I think is really, it's interesting. So only Canadian podcasters who've actually signed up for the Canadian Podcast Awards, like it's a committee, so to speak. You have to have people nominate you who are in the membership, and then they go from there, and then everyone votes all together. And then we find out in December, but the day wasn't specifically given, because not this year, but in 2022, Lullaby was nominated for Outstanding Debut of a Series. And that took me out of the water, because I signed up for the membership, but I didn't know about the nominations. So when it happened, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like fangirling. And that was I'm trying to think, I think it was a month later it was released. The information was released on who won, because you can watch it live on YouTube. They do a big thing for it. And then they do the podcast awards in Toronto, but the time frame's kind of different. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, cool. Well, stay tuned, everybody. That'll be so exciting.
So what is kind of the goal? Is this going to be a hobby, or do you want to turn this into a career if you had the opportunity and only do this?
I would love to do this as a career. I would be able to produce so much more, because doing everything on my own, it's a lot of work when you have a full-time job. And I'm hoping that this year really gets the ball rolling I'm designing merch. So once I do like a big merch drop, everyone kind of goes like, yes. And then, because I like starting off strong, kind of like how my podcast was. My first episodes, I try to keep very consistent with my newest episodes. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping to do that with merch, see where that picks up. Since more people tell others about the podcast, I'm getting more listeners, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping to turn this into a career.
Would you ever consider interviewing like people's families or even the killers themselves if you had that opportunity?
I wouldn't interview a killer for my show, because I wouldn't do that, because I would try not to beat the fucking shit out of them, with all due respect. As for interviewing victims and survivors, that's a bit touchy for me, because as I'm doing this podcast, I'm learning how to interact with people. I'm learning how I myself can feel comfortable with what I'm producing and putting out. So I see in the future that definitely happening. As for within the time frame that I'm at, probably not, unless the opportunity happened. I wouldn't want to approach a survivor, and I wouldn't want them at any point to feel like I'm trying to use them for entertainment.
For sure.
So that's where I would love to interview them just for my own sake. And if they were comfortable coming on, absolutely. I just would never want them to feel that I'm using them for entertainment. Because that's what true crime podcasters kind of deal with, is that stigma of like, you're glorifying crime.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I hear so much in your podcast on mostly like the victim side and how so many of them get screwed over.
Mm.
And Becca and I, we were talking about this, right? Like one of the consistencies that I see all the time is like where the police constantly fuck it up. Like you have the killer in your hands, in the room, pulled over on the side of the car, and like it always just seems to like slip through the cracks. Like they're at their front door and there's like a dead body inside, but they don't make that. You know what I mean? Like it would just be so interesting to talk to some of those people that didn't get to share that side of the story, and they're so fucking pissed off about that. Like why does this continue to happen? Like where is the breakdown that these next steps are not taken when it's so close, because it's so consistent in so many of the stories that you tell.
It's pretty hard, because I know specifically when I was doing the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka case.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
If you're Canadian, those names will just really get your goat, man. Like, it's tough. And that's one of the reasons why true crime podcasts now are bringing so much awareness, because a lot of true crime podcasts have brought up crimes that are unsolved, and now they're reopening these cases, and authorities are now going, obviously I can't speak for them, but it's like, damn, if we fuck this up, we're going to end up shit talked on a true crime podcast. But if that's what it takes to bring everyone justice, then that's what it takes. Like, I may not be wearing a badge, but I'm going to try to get these stories out there. Like the Lavina Johnson case that I did.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. That's one of the recent ones. And it's in the US, and it was the military that dropped the ball. Like that one is just going to grind your gears.
Drop the ball. I mean, I would say like they shattered.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I find interesting? I find interesting, Ashley, you said like people are like, oh, you're not a psychologist, you're not this, that, and the other. Police officers are not either. So I think they're not either. They're not detectives. They enforce the law, and that's it. And I think that's why they dropped the ball. And if you had people like you employed, or even doing what you do is bringing more light to how these individuals who are not psychiatrists or whatever, or even have like an active interest in like you researching. I feel like if there was more people interested, they probably wouldn't do such a terrible job.
And that's, sorry to cut you off, but that's why I get so excited when people who aren't true crime fans say, yours is the first show that I'm introduced to for true crime, and now I want to look more into it. So it's incredible that the reach happens.
Yeah. I like go into a deep hole after, like, I dive deep into like the interweb world of all this stuff after one of your episodes. But going back to like non-psychologists, whatever you want to look, what happened with Don't Fuck with Cats. Like everyone has seen that Netflix documentary, right? Like that was a group of people that were just normal, everyday people. One of them was a casino worker right here in Vegas at the Rio.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Like that person, I can't remember the killer's name. I don't think he would have been caught if it wasn't all of those people gathering all of the information, looking at the plugs in the background to try to figure out what country he's in.
Oh,
like that's how he was caught.
Luca Rocco Magnotta. I did an episode on him. And he pisses me off. He has, so just between us girlfriends, something that I've noticed about Canadian male serial killers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not harking on the male serial killers because there are females who are crazy psycho either, but just for what we're talking about. Ted Bundy is the American cocky SOB that you just want to smack, right? Now, a lot of the other American serial killers, there are some with that ego, that narcissistic personality disorder, and they're on a different kind of level. Whereas Canadian male serial killers, so we'll talk like Paul Bernardo,
Picton,
Robert Picton, who else? The Beast of BC. What's that man's name?
Ken and Barbie, even again.
Paul Bernardo. Yeah. They have this ego of they can almost put themselves out there in the media and still think they're not going to get caught. Like Luca Magnotta was making videos. He was taunting people. So was Paul Bernardo. And they think that they can just get away with it. Whereas a lot of the American serial killers, not including Ted Bundy, they try to hide. And that's something that I've learned from doing my show is you pick up these little patterns. And so when I was doing Luca Magnotta, oh man, I've never had to pause so much in my research than when I did Luca Magnotta, because he went to prison with no remorse and thinks that he didn't do anything wrong. And it's like, brother, like, I hate this guy. I'm sorry. I get a little excited about that one. I'm good. I hate him.
This one is like so messed up to me because didn't he end up dating Karla Homolka?
No. So that's why he's so nuts, is because he wanted to be famous. So he created that rumor that he was dating, which to me is worse. If you create your own rumor that you're dating a serial killer, and then he called a news media over, and he's like, "You're ruining my life. I'm not dating Karla Homolka. I would never date Karla Homolka. These people just want to get under my skin." It's like, that's that ego, that catch me if you can behavior. Mm-hmm. And he's honestly one of the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
What was your favorite? Do you have a favorite one that you deep dived into that was just, or one that like really truly blew your mind beyond anything?
I don't have a favorite case. I have two cases that intrigued me the most, and that would be Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer.
Yeah.
Because he was caught 3 times and he was released. Like he got released from the death penalty multiple times, and then he escaped at the very last minute again, and he died sick in prison. The other one is Richard Ramirez. I don't want to call him the OG, but something about my podcast is I focus on cases where you can really learn something from it. And I know everyone's done Richard Ramirez. However, I like to think that I'm the only one that did Richard Ramirez before he was born. And I discussed his parents. I discussed the progression of all of that, because that's very important. And if you have not listened to my podcast, one thing I want you to take away from this is, if there's a case that you've heard, I can guarantee you that if you listen to it on my show, you will learn something that you didn't know before. And that's why I go completely from A to Z with the cases. And Richard Ramirez, I knew going into it and doing his case that I had to go hard, because he's been, quote, done to death. And I read the book on him and my mind was blown, because I learned things that I didn't know. And once you really start from the beginning and go to the end, I hate to say this, you see it happening. And that's why learning about true crime and these progressions is important, because you can see it happen, and it's the preventative that's the most important, right? Mm-hmm. So
I think one of my most favorite things about your podcast is how you talk about their family history when they were young at the beginning, because you never see any of that. Like if you're watching a Netflix documentary, or I haven't read a true crime book, so I don't know what that's like, but I'm just thinking of just like the average American, I'll just say, right? Like you see it on Netflix, you watch it, and then sometimes you even talk about what shows you would recommend watching versus the ones that you don't, because they don't tell the full story.
That's true.
So your podcast is very honest. It has loads of information from the beginning. That's the part that I love. Like everyone knows, how many people Ted Bundy killed, or, whatever that is, because it's blown up in the media all the time. You give all of the information before on how this person is fucked up and where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's also why it's hard when you see where the authorities have failed in some cases, because it's tough to say from the the killer's family's point of view, because no one wants to believe that someone they know would do such horrific things. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're in the police and you're trained to see all these things, letting things go because you don't want to do the paperwork, I'm sorry, get another job. Now, not all authorities are awful, right? There are those that try really hard, but they will get brushed under by other people, or people will veto their decision. And yeah, it's a really good point that you made.
I have a question. So when you decide on a case that you're going to research, what is, for you or any enthusiast, right? What is the most credible source? Do you scour like old newspapers? Do you, I don't know, walk me through, just like, not even walk me through, but like, what's your favorite resource? What's most credible that you can like rely on?
The most credible you can get is court transcripts, lawyers that were on the case. So first contact with the person involved, and then you move into victims' families. And more often than not, a lot of killers like to talk about themselves, so they will spill it all. And that's where psychiatry is really good, because if you can get the psychiatric reports, which you can find them all, you just have to know where to dig and know the actual names and the credible names in the case. Now, this is one of the reasons why when I release an episode, it can take 2 weeks. Usually I try very hard to release every second Wednesday. Now, being the only person doing the research and all the production and all that, sometimes it can go a little bit longer. Now, that's the biggest thing, is knowing credible sources, being who they are. If you don't know who this person is, you can't find their background, and this is why I don't listen to other true crime podcasts, is because unless they name their sources, what's hearsay, what's thrown in there for creative inspiration, right? I try very hard to stick to my own little circle and go from there. Lawyers are really great, because more often than not, lawyers will talk.
I love that. So going back to you not being like a professional podcaster, this was created out of love. What would you say to listeners out there that want to have their own podcast, want to produce their own podcast? How do you even get started? What would be your words of advice to them?
Find a topic you are passionate about. It could be anything, you guys. It could be cheese. It could be like dog medication. It could be how to make rugs. It could be anything. As long as
it could be anal bleach.
See? Now that's better because if you're passionate about what you're talking about and you get excited to teach people or explain to things to other people, that resonates through audio. And that's the biggest thing I can do, is it doesn't matter what it's about, as long as you try it. And if people don't like it, and I'll tell you this right now, people won't like it, but not everyone is supposed to like it. And as long as you are passionate about what you've chosen to do, what all those other people who might not like it think, it doesn't fucking matter, because you know why you're doing it. People who can basically resonate with you, with what you're talking about, that's what the key is. So if you want to start a podcast, I say choose what you want to do and just fucking do it, and then get a good audio mic.
For one.
Oh, Tim Hortons.
Yeah, I gotta represent Canada.
So
Timmy's.
good.
I have a question, Ashley, and this always, I always ponder it, and I'm sure there's some people that have done theses on it, but why do you think true crime is so popular, mostly with women?
So women are naturally protectors. We naturally want to like the caregivers, right? And the thing with how, and this is what I've read, is what our minds do. And not everyone's this way, but we can't really tend to focus on one little thing. We're always going, okay, but why? But why? But why? Like it's always, we always want to know. Now, the thing with true crime is it provides like intellectual stimulation. It provides us with intricate details and investigation to try to understand why someone could do something so horrific. Now, we want to try and understand that. And another one, morbid fascination, pretty much explanatory. The other one would be like escapism. It allows you to go into a topic that is scary. The idea of that happening to you is scary, but naturally your body's going to try and learn from this. It allows you to learn about a story that's terrifying, but in a controlled and safe space as you're listening to it. Because if it gets scary, you can pause it. If you don't like it, you can turn it off. But in the end, you'll learn something from it. You'll go, okay, well, my flags are going up, and you learn to recognize these signals. So I think that's why with women specifically is because naturally this might not be politically correct, but we naturally want to protect ourselves, right? We don't always want someone else to protect us. So to build that intellectual strength and learn to solve the problem before it happens is really big with women. And there are men too who are the exact same. So I think that's why with true crime, because it allows you to get into a headspace to analyze something that in your head is safe and controlled because it's not you, but you're learning from it. Is that a good answer?
Yeah,
Okay.
interesting. I've never heard those thoughts as like the reason why before. Like typically when I've like searched this out, a lot of people say like women are more often than not the victim of a lot of these crimes. So, I guess it's kind of the same thought as what you said, like to try to protect yourself to like how do I recognize if this is starting to happen to me or to recognize when something is wrong. But yeah, I like yours is more robust because I've never just that one piece never really like resonated with me entirely because as you say, there's a lot of men that are interested in true crime too. But if you look at the statistics, like it's dominated by women. It's a women category. And it's just like, why? Like I go home to relax and I put on like a documentary about a serial killer. Like, why? Is that relaxing and soothing?
And it goes back to that, like, now when you listen to it, if I can turn this around on you, when you listen to it or watch the documentary, do you like it doesn't you're not comfortable, like you're going, oh god, like oh my
Yeah.
god, but it's morbidly a little bit exciting because you're in that controlled environment and you know that
Mhm.
unless it says unsolved mysteries on the title, you know you're going to find out what's going on, and that's what provides that comfort and relaxation while watching it.
Yeah,
Would you say
that's
that
true.
that's true?
Yeah, it's almost like roadkill, like when you're driving on the highway, you don't want to look at it, but you always turn your head and you do,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Luva's face is just like utter disgust right now.
You're like, oh god.
It's like maybe a traffic accident. I don't know, roadkill, but yeah, I get it. I get it because like when I'm usually trying to listen to it while I'm driving or when I'm trying to do like meaningless tasks, right? Where I don't have to be like super focused. But I'll tell you, like if I was putting away my late mother's china the other day and listening to your podcast and Jake walked in and I was like, I have like full fucking anxiety. It's like what Becca's talking about. Like I'm supposed to be like chilling out, relaxing, just getting some stuff done. And he's like, whoa. Because like right getting to the good stuff and obviously like bursts in, he wasn't supposed to be there. So yeah, it's, they wonder why we have such high anxiety and then we go relax and listen to a true crime podcast and then go to bed.
Yeah, there was one thing that I was told in my comm class in grade 10, and my teacher said, she asked the whole class, if there were 3 groups of people, which one would you feel most comfortable with? And the first one was a group of, we'll say, military men. The second one was a group of gangsters, like drug dealers, armed with guns. The next one would be a room of lawyers. And then she asked, which one would you feel safest with, and which one would you feel in the most danger with? And I said, I think a majority of the class said that they would be with the gangsters, they'd feel the most like scared, right? She said, and this sticks with me to this day, you would then be most in danger with the other 2 groups because you feel safe and your guard is down. And yeah, I know, right? Like, oh my God. And that stuck with me. Now, I'm not trying to fearmonger and say that you're always in danger. It's not what I'm saying. It's just that being spatially aware and aware of your surroundings, no matter who you are, whatever gender you are, it's very important. And that stuck with me, man.
Wow. Yeah. Holy.
Grade 10. Trauma started early.
Yeah. Dove right in.
Amazing. Ashley, where can our listeners find you, listen to you? What are all of the links?
You can go to the website at lullabythefearpodcast.com, and you can follow on Instagram and Threads at Lullaby the Fear Podcast, which is where I recommend because it's where I'm the most active with posting updates for the show. And you can listen on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Good Pods. You can listen pretty much anywhere. And all the links will be in my bio on Instagram or on lullabythefearpodcast.com.
Perfect. And we will link them in this episode, and you will keep us posted on this award.
Absolutely.
That's happening, the voting and all of that, how we can get involved. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be on this. I'm fangirling a little bit because I absolutely love your show. I think you've just done such a beautiful job.
Oh, I had so much fun talking with you 3. You are incredible. And pre-listening to your podcast, I knew I was like, I'm going to come on. I can talk about dick and it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me on and letting me just ramble. So I really appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, for listening this far. I've kept you entertained.
Yes. So good. Well, go look at those links in the show notes and listen to her podcast. Follow her on social. You do have to request, and she has to approve you.
I do?
So, or at least in the past, yes.
Oh,
Yes. On Instagram, you have to be
I
invited.
just followed her.
Oh, see, I'm public. Sometimes, see, this is what I do. So this is what I do for my own boundary is if I feel overwhelmed by social media, but I don't want to have to look at my phone, I'll go private. And then I don't have to worry about bots following me, worried about getting hacked. I can just like go to sleep. And that's what I do. I'm not trying to be a dick.
Oh,
no, but I liked it. I was like, I went back to my partner. I was like, I've been accepted into the fear cult. Look.
Yeah. We thought it was like a thing. Like she had to suss you out first before she allowed you in.
That's so funny.
Okay, well, just go follow and you'll see. Maybe you'll be allowed right away. You might have to request.
You're welcome into the fear cult.
So good. Yeah, thank you for coming on. I feel like we could have talked for way longer. And we'll be the first downloads on your next episode that comes out, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Okay, now don't leave.